Welcome to the limited edition series, The Stream at UNGA, the United Nations General Assembly. We are teaming up this week with the United Nations to bring you some of the biggest issues in the world right now. These are conversations we are not intending to have by ourselves. So we are on TV, we are on Instagram, we are on YouTube, and you know what to do. You can just jump into the comments section and you too can be part of every conversation this week. So today we are looking at misinformation around COVID-19. Welcome to the guests. I have to say hello to Claire, and then Claire can tell everybody who she is. Do your own introduction, Claire. Go ahead.
Hi, Femi. I'm Claire Wardle, and I'm the US Director of First Draft. We're a non-profit that help people tackle the challenges of misinformation. So I'm pretty excited about this conversation.
Good to have you. Hello, Heidi. Tell everybody who you are.
Sure. I'm Heidi Larson, and I'm a professor of anthropology at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, but I lead something called the Vaccine Confidence Project, and we're trying to build confidence around vaccine, but also trying to understand why people don't have confidence.
I always call him David, but officially he's Dr. David Nabarro. David, tell everybody who you are, why you're critical to this conversation. Go ahead.
Hello, Femi. First of all, it's just lovely to be with you again. I'm David, as you say. I've been working as a public health doctor for a lot of years, more than 40, and I'm really interested in helping people handle really complex challenges. Right now, I'm working with the World Health Organization as Envoy on COVID-19.
David, I'm just wondering what's the worst thing that you've seen in terms of misinformation. Let me show you some things that our online community are sharing at the moment. So we said we're looking at some of the fibs, the lies, the misinformation around COVID-19 on Twitter. Masks don't help stop infection. COVID-19 is no worse than flu. Coronavirus tests cause brain damage. And then underneath, somebody jumped in and said, coronavirus is a project made by Bill Gates. And then another commenter says, very true. And above, they can all fake, and they're absolutely right. And then one more, David, because I'm just interested about how you actually deal with this. Because underneath the comments, somebody said, well, yeah, they absolutely are fake. And then one more. This is from Dwight John 161. Sit down, you're an utter space cadet. So I think what they actually meant was you're kind of misinformed. David, how do you deal with this? You're a special envoy for coronavirus 19, helping the world get it right. And then you're seeing stuff like this.
This is a huge, horrible disease outbreak. I've never seen anything like it in my life. And the trouble is, it's just at the beginning. We're going to see more people with this disease and more people will die. You know, you've got, I suspect, at least 5,000 health workers have died. Nearly 1 million people have died as a result of this virus. It's horrible. And you see, I don't think many people find this easy to believe, because sometimes it seems worse than science fiction. And so, as everybody is trying to make sense of it, for a lot of people, the most immediate thing to do is to find someone to blame. You just saw Mr. Gates, who has been the most incredible philanthropist for global health, is accused of being responsible for it. And I've seen, of course, statements being made about masks actually make you worse, or the tests actually make you sick. If you use a vaccine, it's going to induce some kind of computer chip into you. And I think that's because people actually are stuck. After they explain something so terrible happening to humanity, and I like to feel that over time we'll get used to it, but we are dealing with something very new, with a lot of uncertainties, and I think it'll be quite rocky for the next few months. I just hope that this kind of misinformation doesn't cause too many people to get sick and die. And that does worry me. And I have to keep saying to everybody, even if you get the COVID, and you recover, there are an awful lot of people who are actually not feeling well for a very long time afterwards. This is not trivial. This is a really serious illness, even for the survivors.
Claire, this isn't the first time that you've been on the stream talking about misinformation, but we haven't talked about anything that seemed as serious as a global pandemic before. What makes this situation different? Does it make this situation different?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, Femi. I think we were talking about election misinformation before, and for the last 4 years, that's been the kind of misinformation we've been talking about. Different elections have struggled with this. But often people would say to me, oh, that's just politicians, they always lie. But actually now what we're seeing is, A, this is affecting the whole planet at the same time. And what we're seeing is health misinformation is really damaging and leads to real world harm. And so I think the good thing, if there's a tiny silver lining in all of this, is that we've seen more people wake up to the damaging aspects of misinformation. But I've been working in this space for 10 years. I've never seen one story where you'd see rumors crossing border to border in seconds and seeing the same rumors appear. I mean, just the scale of the kind of problems that we're working with right now is nothing like I've seen, certainly in 10 years.
Our job, Claire, is to be good communicators. We're trying to get great information over to the public. There was one example you brought of a rumour, which is a gentleman with an Irish accent talking about what was going to happen during lockdown. And as I listened to this, I thought, my friends told me this back in March. And I was thinking, this can't possibly be true. But this was a rumour that was going all over the world. Have a listen to this. Let's have a listen.
I know there's a lot of videos and messages going around on Facebook in relation to lockdown and the army this and the guards that and so forth. But take what I'm going to tell you as gospel next. My best friend was in a meeting today. He works for Europcar and he was in a meeting with An Garda Síochána, the HSE and the Irish Defence Forces. The HSE purchased 30 cars from them on the basis that it was cheaper than leasing them, as they want them for 3 to 6 months because they think that's how long this will take.
So the version I originally heard was, my best friend is in the army and they have told us ... I heard that and I just thought, that can't be true. But then what is the worst that can happen with that, Claire? You go first. David, I know you want to jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just to let everybody know, when you would see a WhatsApp message that starts with, my sister knows, my brother works for, everybody should be very concerned because that's one of the easiest kind of tactics that we see all the time. But the problem is it's very difficult to debunk. If the idea is my brother was in a secret government meeting, you know, there's this idea, well, you know, Al Jazeera can't debunk it because they wouldn't have been in that secret meeting. And so that's why this kind of content gets shared so widely, because we as humans, whether we're trying to share a spoiler for a TV show or to like, I know something that you don't, that's why this stuff, it resonates. And as you say, back in March, I'll put my hand up. I shared something along these lines. I was living alone at the time. I was terrified. And this is my job. But it said there's 72 hours, everything's going to lock down in New York. And then, of course, the next morning I woke up and was like, this is why we're here. This is a human problem. It doesn't matter how educated you are, how much media literacy training you've had. In a pandemic, our lives have been turned upside down. And as David said, we're looking for answers. And unfortunately, these WhatsApp messages provide that simplistic narrative that is soothing to us as humans. We want those explanations. We don't want confusion and the kind of complexity that journalism brings us. We want simplicity.
David is making notes. What are you writing down on your pad, David?
I just wrote down, if only we knew all the answers, our job would be so much easier. But we quite often have to say to people, I don't know. I don't know how long you get immunity after you've been infected with the virus. I don't know how long it's going to take a vaccine to come and whether that vaccine is going to be thoroughly effective. And that's what makes it difficult for people. If these so-called experts don't know, who does? And then that big nagging fear builds up that somebody somewhere is doing something terrible to us all. So all I'm just saying is, I don't think we should be terribly surprised, but I agree with Heidi and Claire and you that unfortunately the result is some really bad things happen. People play around drinking bleach or taking the wrong pills. And that's, I think, we've really got to work hard to avoid.
Heidi,
I
this
think
is
I
where
just
you
say,
come
David,
in because Heidi, this is what you've been doing. You've been trying to help people work out what is true, what is false, what do they need to know. Tell us about your work, Heidi.
Well, it's interesting what David was saying. Well, both Claire and David, it's the uncertainty. I mean, we look at what we call triggers, like what's the piece of information, what's the fertile ground that makes it spread, and what are the impacts. Well, in the context of COVID, like Claire, we have never seen anything like we are now, particularly in the sense that these rumors and misinformation are they're joining up with all kinds of different groups that they weren't interacting with before and amplifying in ways. And as David said, we don't have the answer. So, for people wagging their fingers at social media companies to say, clean up the bad information. Well, we don't even have with this brand new virus, with all these aspects of it, we do have some information, and we should be clear about that. I think a lot of the inconsistency in guidance, I think some of the uncertainty, there are things where we can be more helpful in consistency, but also in having empathy with people. I mean, yeah. I think we should be saying, this is a really complicated, difficult time. We empathize with you. We're kind of losing trust by giving a lot of restrictions, and we need to listen more to publics. And I know it's complicated, but that's where the approaches that Claire had mentioned, like my brother said, that some kind of, it feels personal. It feels like, oh, they're just like me. I'm in that book, and it's about doubting and uncertainty. Not to make it more complicated, but I think in these times, like, there's something tangible we can do. We know people need a flu vaccine this season more than ever. So let's go with something that people know, that we feel confident on. We have the information. Start to build some trust around some tangible things people can do. People have lost a lot of time on basic childhood vaccines, on all kinds of other basic health needs that they weren't able to get taken care of. If we want to start building people's trust before, for instance, we get a COVID vaccine, there are little opportunities where we can make people feel like we actually care about them, and aren't just reprimanding them for the misinformation, which actually we sort of understand. It's a different story for as they call them, the bad actors who are purposefully trying to disrupt. That's a different story. But I think we need to really try to understand and empathize with the people who are genuinely, uncertain.
Great.
Let me bring in here the Vaccine Confidence Project. This is what Heidi is working on, so that if you're not sure and you feel that you don't want to ask a question to somebody, you don't want to send in a tweet to us here at the stream, but you can find out yourself about all of the different details about vaccines on the vaccineconfidence.org. You can go there. Shivansh Trivedi, guess, is a regular viewer of the stream. He is based in Uganda. He's a student, and he's having trouble working out facts from fiction when it comes to COVID-19. Here he is.
In Uganda, for example, over 70% of our population are youth. And as one of them, our primary source of information is social media, such as Facebook, Instagram, and so on and so forth. So how can we know what information is correct information? How do we know that this is the right information to believe? And since these social media platforms don't red flag false sources immediately, how can we know which sources to trust?
Can I make a comment on that one, please, Femi?
Please, David.
Well, first of all, it was absolutely great to hear Heidi speak just a few minutes ago and really focus on empathy and trust. I think that matters. And to Shivansh, I want to say the following. I promise you that material that appears on the website of the World Health Organization has been reviewed very carefully by the world's top scientists, and it's the very best that they can offer in terms of truth and also in terms of absolute validity. I totally get what you're saying, but this is our service to you. We work only for one thing, and that is for the well-being of every human being in the world.
Claire, I want to bring you in here because there's a lot on social media. Shivant's made a really good point. There's a lot out there, and it can be helpful and it can also be problematic. And you sent us some examples. I'm just going to do a little bit of a show and tell. I will show the pictures on my laptop. You can talk us through how we know. Is that true? Is that not true? So we can give our viewers some practical examples about what they need to do. Let's start with this one. Are you good and scared yet? Ready to let them shut down your city? Ready to let them lock you up in your house, ready to let them inject you with poisons? I'm scared just reading that out.
And that's a deliberate tactic. Bad actors, as Heidi said, want us to be scared because when we're scared and we have heightened emotions, we're less likely to let the critical part of our brains kick in. And so unfortunately, a lot of the kind of conversation we're now seeing about a potential COVID vaccine isn't about misinformation to do with the vaccine. It's just saying, what kind of society do you want to live in? And so we have to be very aware of people basically trying to make us frightened because that leads us nowhere. This is an example. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest challenges we have is genuine imagery used out of context. So here we actually have a big parade from 2016 in Cleveland.
So
in
Claire,
the US.
move your head for a moment so they can do the compare and contrast. Okay, there you go. Beautiful head, but let's just take it out of the picture for a moment. All right, compare and contrast.
So on the left-hand side, we see an image that's saying nice weather has brought people out of the march to end COVID-19. I think this was back in May, and it was about shaming people to say you shouldn't be congregating. But actually, look, this is an image from 2016 when the Cavaliers won a championship. And this is the biggest, I mean, this isn't difficult to put together. It's a genuine image. But again, if you want to shame people, if you want to say, look at people, you know, not wearing their masks, this does what it needs to do, which is to get people in their camps and to get angry. The other thing I'd say is people need to be so careful. We're seeing so many financial scams at the moment, which is people trying to sell things based on people being frightened. So be really wary about anybody basically saying, listen, £39, this is going to solve something for you. They've used the NHS logo, the National Health Service logo from the UK, which is a way of basically providing credibility. It's a trick. So you'll be like, oh, it's an NHS sponsor thing. Anybody that uses Photoshop can create this. Again, people just have to think constantly, why would somebody be sharing this? Well, this is about making money. So there's many tactics. Many of them are relatively simple.
Yeah. So what you're saying, Claire, is you're boiling it down to practically looking at what you're seeing and also some common sense, like just really examine it a little bit more, make all of us citizen journalists and examine it. Heidi, I am just thinking about vaccines, and there is a history of people not trusting vaccines. Why do you think that is? Because that's the next step where we are now, is people saying, well, I'm not going to take the vaccine. They're testing it so quickly. It can't possibly be safe. Yeah. In the States, President Trump is talking about having a vaccine ready by October. It's in a couple of weeks' time.
Well, if there's one thing we've learned in any vaccination campaign, don't launch a new vaccine in an election period. It's, we have a history of that being a problem in different countries. The Dengvaxia saga in the Philippines was a new vaccine launched during a political campaign, and it was one example, but there are multiple ones where we say try to the extent you can, separate politics and vaccines, but particularly elections. But this is one that is not interruptible, unfortunately, in the U.S. But I don't think, the risk is you don't want to undermine a vaccine. The silver lining is all of a sudden, President Trump seems quite enthusiastic about vaccines. We've come a long way because he was not too keen on vaccines a while ago. So if we try to spin something out of it, actually, he's risking losing some of the constituencies following him because he was against vaccine. Now he's for vaccines. But at any rate, I do think that overall, we've just published a big paper in The Lancet on following global trends in vaccine confidence. We've been collecting data for the last 5 years, 250,000 people around the world. and looking at how it changes. As Claire says, this stuff travels across the world in memes in different ways, and looking at how it travels. The good news is, overall, in the last 5 years, there has been a slightly positive trend. Not everywhere, but there has been a positive trend. But I think it's because there started to be a lot more attention, and there's been more of an effort, but not in situations of any kind of insecurity or conflict. There, the confidence has gone down.
There are lots of questions on YouTube for all of you guests. Let me just share this one first of all with Heidi. Eston says, hi Eston, are we going to be forced into having a vaccine? I'm really worried about the hurry they're trying to make one. How safe are we going to be if there is a vaccine? Heidi, do you feel comfortable taking that on?
Sure. That was one of the biggest anxieties in 2009 around the H1N1 pandemic. Everybody thought it was too quick, too soon. And that's a more typical annual vaccine that was just a new strain. I think in this case, what is not in the news, we hear a lot about it's faster, we're going to get there, it's going to be speedy. But we're not hearing a lot about why it's faster. It's faster because we have a funding mechanism, CEPI, that we didn't have for Ebola. And it's because of Ebola that was ready to quickly fund some vaccines. We have a lot of technologies. These vaccines for COVID are being made in different ways. It's not like we're shortchanging an old vaccine process that took 18 months to multiple years. So there are things that are making this possible. What the good news is that in the US, a group of manufacturers of vaccine got together and said, we will not be pushed to make these vaccines quicker than we believe them to be safe and effective.
There is so much going on YouTube. David, I saw you smiling as Heidi was talking about technology and the progress we're making with vaccines. John says this on YouTube, which is pretty it's being reflected by a lot of other people commenting as well. Thanks, John. We don't know who to believe anymore. The scientists change their minds back and forth. The presidents change their minds back and forth. And the CDC, that's the Centers for Disease Control in the United States, change their mind back and forth. So who do we believe anymore? David.
Well, the great thing about scientists is they have discipline. And the discipline is, if you find you're not right when you've done your experiment or study, you tell the world that you've had to change your position on something. And so the reason why scientists do from time to time change their minds is because they find out new things, and that forces them to do so. Remember, this is a new virus. But I'll just say one last thing. If a scientist does change her or his mind, I think that it is right that the scientist should be asked by members of the public to explain the shift. If they can explain it clearly and well, then it's worth believing them. If, on the other hand, you get the feeling when you hear them that they're just trying to pull the wool over your eyes, then questions should be asked. Science, after all, is about discovering, and discovering means that from time to time, we do have to change what we think about things.
I want to share with you some information. This has been an information-heavy show and a really important one. Thank you very much, Guess. The Africa CDC have a rumour tracking report. You can see that on their site and on their Twitter feeds as well. And they're helping to push back in terms of the rumours that are going around the African continent. I think it's really important that you visit Verified, shareverified.com. That is the UN, that is the WHO getting together and saying, come here for great information, come here to find out about COVID-19. And also it's very engaging, very entertaining, and on purpose, because they don't want to get you bored. And then, of course, this is what Heidi's been talking about, the vaccineconfidence.org. Go there again for good information, particularly if you're nervous to find out about vaccines. We need an hour for this show. We only had 25 minutes and you used it really well.
Short.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, David. I say that for most shows. Too short. Thank you, you two, for being part of the conversation as well. See you next time. Stream at UNGA continues very soon. Bye-bye, everybody.